So today we wanted to focus on two sides. One is the resin that we use for jewelry. Oh, Chesko is gone, I think, but he will probably be back. And the other one is about the 3D printing. So how we print with this jewelry, what we need to take care of it, how what to be careful of. So I just want to go through two slides. Maybe there are some participants that don't know about us. Basically, we are a Turkish company. We started in 2013, and we manufacture resin and 3D printers, mostly for jewelry and dental area. We have 4 offices, two in Istanbul, 1 in Adana, and 1 in Dubai. And we have many resellers around the world, so maybe some of them, they are following us today. Okay, so yeah, just a note, this is our 3D printer. Some of you may use it. It's a DLP projector-based 3D printer. And one big advantage of our printer is that we focus really to make it specific for jewelry. So it is very high resolution, and also it is very, very fast. As we will speak about the resins, and as you may know, we have quite a good number of castable resins. So these are the products that we manufacture. Please, you can break me at any time if there is any question, but I'm just going through quickly the let's say the presentation. So we have.
I will do, but
okay.
Should we check for Mr. Chesko because we lost him?
Okay, I think he's here.
Yes.
Okay,
great.
Okay, perfect. If we keep it that way. So
technical issues.
No problem. Okay, that's perfect. So basically, we have different type of resin that we use either for LCD printers, DLP printers, and also SLA printers. These are mostly castable resins, and we have one which is mostly non-castable for making liquid molds. Maybe Chesko, you use mostly wax resin, as far as I know. But we will discuss different type of resins and what are the differences. So the big specialty of our castable resin is the casting results. We tried a lot of, we worked a lot in R&D in the last, let's say, 4 years to improve the castability of the resins and to make it in a way that it works with pretty much most of the investments that are used. We will have a session of webinar about casting, I think, very soon. But we can, Chesko, you may discuss also about casting. So these are my introduction. Now, about the resins.
Hold on. Can I interrupt you, Mr. Hakan? We have one question from Mr. Emi, who is asking that among these, which one is direct castable?
Okay, basically,
from the last
slide? From this slide, yes. All the one on the left, outside of the RTV resin, which is written as mold resin, all of them, these 2, 4, 6, 7 products, burn, opaque, dark, wax, zero, solus, and form, are all castable resins. I didn't put here our dental resin or other resins. They are all castable outside of the RTV one, which is resin non-castable for making molds. Okay. Now, they have differences, whether it's about the printing or the sharpness, and we will discuss that. But all of them are very good castable resins. So one thing I want to speak that is very much asked to us today is how do we wash the prints and, what to take care of. Now, first of all, our resin, the main composition is slightly different from the other resins you have on the market. And the big difference is that you don't need post-curing after printing. So once you have done your printing, you just wash with ethyl alcohol. And typically they ask me, what is the percentage of alcohol shall I use? Can I use IPA? Okay, we have customers using IPA, but we prefer ethanol, ethyl alcohol, because it's less corrosive. And typically we use, let's say, 96% or 91% ethyl alcohol when we wash it. So very standard, is also cheaper than IPA in most countries. What we recommend is that you first use in a dirty container, so you leave 2 containers. You can use ultrasonic washing machines, but we don't recommend to leave it too long in the alcohol. So typically you would you would keep it like for 10, 20 seconds, wash it, dip it, and then dry it with the compressed air. And at the last washing, you use basically very clean alcohol. That's what we recommend. Okay, now where can you use all those resins? Here you have a table where you can see. I've put here a lot of different type of 3D printers. Now you have the LCD printers, like these are usually cheaper 3D printers. Maybe some of you know Anycubic Photon, or what else do we have there? There is MakeX, Kudo, and all those kind of LCD printers. So for them, you can use burn, opaque, wax, or zero. And I will tell after what are the differences. But we don't recommend to use for LCD printers the dark one, because the dark one, actually you can still use it in LCD printers, but dark one has a longer exposure time. So typically LCD printers has a lower light exposure, and instead of maybe curing for 10 seconds or 15 seconds per layer, if you use the dark, you will need, let's say, 20 or 25 seconds. So we don't recommend the dark for the LCD printers. And you may use still the RTV resin for LCD printers. Solus and Form are specific printers. Form is for Formlabs, DWS, and SLA printers. So you can see it below. Maybe you can change the camera, Tülay, because we are on it, I think. But if you look on the bottom of the table, basically there is DWS, Formlabs, Form2, and Pipoli-Moi that are SLA. These printers are using laser, and we recommend to use the Form resin for that. And all the rest are DLP printers. Typically, DLP printers works with projectors. They are more professional 3D printers. And we recommend for DLP printers opaque, wax, dark, and zero as castable ones. And you may still use the RTV for liquid dye or liquid mold making. Okay.
There is a frequently asked questions like, okay, what is wax content in your opaque resin? I'm sure it's frequently asking to you also, Mr. Cesko, because everybody is wondering how is it in casting. So please, you can answer, or Mr. Hakan.
Yeah, I mean, we have.
You mean the castability of the opaque resin and the wax?
No, I think they were asking about the wax content.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hello?
They were asking. Yes, we can hear you, Cesko. Can you hear us? Okay.
Yeah, it's okay for me.
Yeah, perfect for me as well. So basically, the question is how much wax there is in the resins. Now, resins are not exactly like wax, so they are thermoset, and I mentioned that in our previous webinar. The highest content of wax is in our wax resin. We have put the most wax content in the wax resin. However, this doesn't really affect the castability of the resin when you compare them. I mean, it's not the wax content that will affect the casting quality. The wax content will affect the printing quality. It may smoothen some surface, it may have different properties. But if you're looking about the best castable resin, the castability is not really affected by the wax content in it. The reason for that is that if you light up let's say a resin part, it's not like wax. It will not melt and drop. It will basically become a gas. So when you look to burn, opaque, or wax, or even dark, they all become from solid state to a gaseous state when you light them up. And it doesn't matter how much wax you have in it.
Hold on, please, Mr. Hakan. There is a sound problem, I guess, because of your sound. Let's ask for our attendees if they have any issues to hearing your sound.
Can you hear me, Tülay? Or
I hear you well. I hear you well. There's no issues. Let me ask to attendees.
Okay. Can they hear me? I was speaking maybe a bit too fast. I don't know.
I don't know.
Can you hear me? No? Oh, sound is great. Katy, thank you. Okay, perfect. Everybody can
great.
hear.
Maybe there is a issue because of Mr. Chesko couldn't hear you well.
Okay.
It's okay.
Sorry. Let me repeat very briefly. Basically, resin is not. It's a thermoset. It's a polymer that becomes solid when you have UV. And when you burn it, what happens is that it becomes a gas. It doesn't melt, or it doesn't drops like the wax. So we have a higher content of wax inside the wax resin, but the content is around 3-4%. And by the way, you cannot really increase the wax content inside the resin because it will affect very badly the printing quality. So if somebody says, there is 80% wax or 90% wax in it, trust me, as a manufacturer, this is not true. What happens is that the look of the print looks like waxy, like in our wax resin, but the wax content is very minimal, and you cannot really incorporate high amount of wax inside the resin. I hope I answered the question.
Yes, it's correct. Also, there is one more question, which is, what is the difference between your castable resins?
Yeah,
this is also one of the most frequently asked questions. I think we need Mr. Chesko here also, but he has some technical issues.
Yeah, he will join us maybe at the end. Okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
So I just want to mention that most of the settings of all the printers we mentioned earlier are on our website. So if you go to powerresins.com and on the printer settings area, you can have settings for Asiga, for Frozen, for Rapid Shape, and all the other printers as well. And by the way, for Asiga, you can find our settings also on their own website. So depending on the printers that you are using, you can go on our website and you can just download or view the parameters on how to print that. Now, what are the differences of all those castable resins? This, I think, will maybe summarize the difference. First of all of them, they don't need post-curing. So there is no difference on that side. There is a difference in the printing speed. Now, if you can see on the left-hand side, the burn, opaque, zero, solus are fast printing resins. Wax is very fast. I mean, it's around 30-40% faster than a burn or opaque. And the dark one is slightly slower. So that's why we don't recommend the dark one for the LCD printers, because they have low light intensity. There is a difference in the shrinkage area, because all pretty much castable resins, after you print them, they tend to shrink if you leave them like 2, 3, 4 days in open air. So what very honestly here, I put like the shrinkage ratio for burn, opaque, dark, and solus or form. They are medium shrinking resins. If you want a resin that doesn't shrink at all, we have the zero resin that doesn't shrink. It's less than 1% of shrinkage. And
excuse me. Let's check with Mr. Chesko if all is good. You hear us together?
Yes, everything's okay.
Okay, perfect. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Chesko, I was mentioning, by the way, I know you are also selling Asiga. I was mentioning to our attendees that they can also download the INI files from Asiga website or on our website.
Yes, every Asiga user can get into his Asiga account, and there they can find all the INI files for the Power Resins, all of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
And here I was mentioning about the shrinkage. From our test, basically it depends on many variables, the shrinkage. But from our test, wax tends to be the highest shrinkage. But I know you have a different experience on that. And I will be curious to know your feedback, because you are mostly using wax resin, as far as I know.
Yes. And with the last formulation, we are not having many shrinkage. It's not very high. It used to be higher before.
Yeah.
But also it depends on the customer. Some customers prefer opaque, and some others prefer wax. in my experience, both of them casts very well.
Okay.
They're very casting is very good.
Perfect. Now about the printing properties, there is here what I call the sagging, bleeding, sharpness, and smoothing of the surface. Now, what we call sagging or bleeding is, let's say, if you are printing a T like that, you may have in the corners of the 90 degrees angle some of the resins that will overcure. Now, we have a little bit of sagging in burn and opaque, and we don't have it actually in dark at all. So one of the particularity of the dark resin is that it doesn't have any sagging, and because you don't have any sagging, it is actually a very sharp resin. What we call sharp resin is that it gives you pretty much the same details like the CAD file that you put in, and it's very, very sharp in the sense that you can have the pavé, the micro pavé, or the prongs very, very well printed, as far as I know. I know you tested also the
yes, yes, we have tested for micro pavé, and I must say that the results were very, very good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is why also on the right-hand side, depending on your jewelry type, so if you are going to do some stone settings directly on the resin, you may prefer to choose the dark. The 0 as well is very good for stone settings. Or if you are doing mostly filigree or light jewelry, you may use, our first, let's say, resin, which is burn or opaque. You may use also for surface jewelry or heavier jewelry. Wax tends to make it more smooth, so you may prefer to use the wax resin, and this is why I think one of the reasons why you prefer that resin.
Yes, I prefer wax resin because of the smoothness. Gets a very smooth surface, okay, and the casting is pretty good. So for me, it's one of my favorites.
Yeah. There is a question, I think, from Carlos.
I have one question, which is a good. The resin shrink, can I just compensate in the CAD file?
Yes, I definitely. You can basically increase slightly. You need to have the knowledge of the resin and the print writing. Do you want to comment on that? Maybe, Cesco?
I mean, you can also try to work with a light exposure as well. But yes, you can make your adjustments. I mean, we have all made adjustments with the CAD design. That it's something I don't like because sometimes you get lost. I mean, I think I would prefer to work with light exposure instead of working with the design. But you can do it. Yes.
You mean to have a higher light exposure and more consistency over the print, right?
Yeah.
So basically what I can say about the light exposure is if you have the right parameters and the right exposure, what happens is that every layer is well cured. So there is a coefficient of cureness. Let's say you can never cure something 100%, but you may cure it like 70, 80%. And when you have every layer of 50 or 25 micron that are well cured in terms of having the right time and the right light exposure, then what happens is that after that you will have less shrinkage. That's the way I understand it. Do you agree with that? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Completely.
Perfect.
Excuse me, I have one question, Mr. Aravind, which is like, which one of your resin for Formlabs? We already answered this, but let me repeat it again. We have PowerCast Form Resin to use with SLA 3D printers, which is like Formlabs, DWS, you can use it. And one question about Mr. Joel and Wadi is about all of our RTV resin, if they can use it with rubber mold or only silicone mold.
RTV resin, it's made for silicone molds. It's the only resin that if you post-cure it, it will harden quite well. You can polish it. You could make rubber mold, but in some customers, there is an issue where it sticks. So basically what happens is that when you cut the rubber, it sticks to it. So they use some talc, some powder, so that to decrease the sticking. But I don't know, do you have any experience of people using rubber mold with RTV or any other resin?
Well, they use Teflon spray.
Teflon spray, yeah. That's another way also. So you can try it. For sure, we recommend silicone mold because we know all our customer can use it safely. But for rubber, you need to be careful on whether you're using, powder or Teflon spray, which makes sense as well. Okay, so
excuse me, one more question.
Sure.
Is about density of our wax resin.
Okay, when we speak about density, pretty much all our resin are the same. Now, density is something that is, I think, not well understood in the jewelry community. Now, the density of our resins, most of them are 1.14. So let's say if you have a 3D design, you print it, you check the millimeter cube, the volume of this, and you know that if you have like something that is 1 decimeter cube, that will weight normally, if it's water, it will weight 1 kilogram. So 1 millimeter cube would weight 1 gram. Now, maybe if I'm not wrong. So in our case, something that is 1 millimeter cube will weight 1.14 in terms of the resin weight. But I think that usually they ask these questions because they want to do light jewelry. And a lot of jewelry manufacturers think that if the density of the material is lower, you will have actually a lower weight in gold, which is not true. Because you can have something that has the same volume, but weighs very heavy. And when you cast, the investment will take the same volume area, and the gold will be the same in terms of weight. So when we speak about density, I have a slide actually later on where we show you about the overexposure and how to calculate and everything. But let's not mix density with the weight of the gold and the volume that it takes. What matters, I think, is that the print is exactly like the CAD file. If you can get the same thickness, surface, and everything, you will have the expected gold weight that you want. I don't know if that makes sense. Chesko, do you want to add something? Please, you can.
No,
yeah, I'm just.
No. I mean, that's exactly what do I think about it.
Okay.
I mean, what you have to think is that you must get the same CAD file. I mean, the same piece that you get. So everything is about knowing very well your printer, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And of course, having a printer that always gives you the same light intensity.
Yeah.
So you don't have differences of light intensity.
Yeah, that's something we discussed in our previous webinar. There are some printers, and mostly they are low-range printers where the middle of the plate and the corners don't have the same light intensity. So when you do that, you may have, let's say, 10-15% of gold weight difference because the light in the middle is, let's say, 15% higher than the corners. And when you cure with higher light intensity, you will have, obviously, more curing, which means more volume, which means more weight. I have a slide which I will mention.
Yes. I
Excuse me, I have one more question from Katie. Asking about, should I print sprues with my resin or should I add it as wax?
We have a slide at the end about supporting. You can actually do directly your casting sprue on the design, and you can add it as well. But Chesko, maybe you have more experience on that, about the casting side.
I mean, if you have the knowledge of how to correctly sprue it for the casting, I think that you can do it. I mean, and you should do it in the file. But otherwise, if you don't have the experience and the knowledge to do the right sprueing, that makes no sense. If you make it on your own, right? If you're casting your own I think it's a very good thing to do, to draw all because you're going to be more precise, more polished, right? To make all the right sprues. Otherwise, I don't think it makes any sense other than making one sprue, one big sprue to hold the piece.
Yeah, I agree. So depends on your, let's say, knowledge of the design, but also of casting, I would say.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go through the presentation briefly, and then so here are some pictures of our power cast wax resin. Now the big advantage of it is that it smoothens the surface, and that's why I think in Europe and in US a lot of our customers are using it. If you don't adjust well the parameters on this resin, and I mean you know very well this because you have great prints, Cesco, but if you don't adjust very well, you may have some over smoothing, which means a sort of bleeding on that resin. So you need to be careful on the parameters that you are using for that resin. That's my view on it. If you don't want to force too much, and mind, by the way, that the smoothing on the resin is important, but what matters is the casting at the end. So you don't want to over smooth things, and sometimes you better use opaque or dark resin so that you may have this sharpness and not have the over smoothing of the wax resin. But on the other side, I know you like it very much, so and I like it as well, by the way.
Yeah, but I must say that we have, and I must thank Stephen Weiss from Ziga, that has been very hard worker to get the right ini file for this resin, right? Because he's been working so hard to get the right parameters. At the end, we have very good results with casting in many places. Okay, so that's at the end what matters. And I think that everything starts with the resin. Doesn't matter what printer are you working with. If you don't have a good casting, makes no sense.
That's correct. I mean, because it's a fast curing resin and it has this smoothing or bleeding can happen, you need to be careful. Like, let's say 10% of difference in your parameters may affect a lot the printing. So that's where I would say.
Yeah.
I have some settings questions, actually. Alex is asking if which resin is best for Envision Tech. I have also another question, like which settings can I use for Kuda Bean 3D printer?
Okay.
And another question from Joe, which one can I use can I use dark resin for frozen?
Okay, so let's go with Kudo and Frozen first. These are both LCD printers. First of all, you can use dark resin with LCD printers as well. It's just that you need to keep the exposure longer. So instead of having, let's say, 15 seconds or 10 seconds, depending on the light intensity of your printer, you will increase it by 30% or 40%. And the other question is about Envision. Envision, it's a DLP printer. UV based. You can use the dark resin very easily because it is quite sharp, so you will not have this bleeding. But typically Envision are closed machines, so I don't know how you can use it by using their own tag system. We have some customers using the burn resin as well with Envision. Some customers also, they mix the burn or opaque resin with Envision on resin to improve the casting quality. So these are different variations that we have. I hope I answered those questions. So let me go briefly. Here we have the dark resin, right? The big advantage of this one is that there is no bleeding, so it's very, very sharp. And if you are going to print something that needs high details, you may want to use this one. Also for stone settings, because the prongs details are very important when you want to set the stones. You mentioned that, Cesco, earlier on the micro pave, I think. There, I think the dark resin is the let's say the favorite.
It's impressive. I mean, the sharpness of the detail is really impressive. I must say that is one of the best castable resins for detail that I've tried, because for molding resins, it's very easy to have sharpness. Okay, all the machines can have a resin that makes everything sharp with a non-castable resin. But for castable resins, this is in my opinion, the one that has higher resolution I have tried by far.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's, by the way, I want to say that we have the dark resin that has very sharpness, and we have also the zero resin, which is not on our website yet, but we have tested on some customers. It is quite sharp as well. The dark will be much sharper, but zero as well is quite sharp. We have a black version of the zero, which is quite sharp.
Sorry, there is many questions about our zero resin. Everybody wonder about it, like it's because there is no shrinkage.
Okay.
Everybody is asking if we launch it soon.
Actually, we did some tests in Dubai, in some Arabic countries, and with some resellers. Now, I will be very honest, depending on the country and on the investment and the process they use, because the formulation is very different from all our other casting resins, it is very good castability, but the feedbacks are very good, for example, in Dubai, in Arabic regions, also in Turkey. But some customers, they are used to one resin, so it's very difficult to change them to another one. So in other words, if somebody is using opaque resin or burn resin, and burn has been on the market more than 2 years now, or opaque as well, they don't tend to change it to another resin, because as soon as they see a problem in the casting, they think that it's mainly due to the resin issue. So this is why before launching anything, we want to do a lot of tests, which we have done since I think it was November or October. So it has been well tested. We are already selling it. We didn't launch it in our website, but you can contact us and we can, we can sell it. And also it will be, I think, very shortly on our website.
I would like to say about this, I mean, what you say, when somebody is casting with a resin and is having good results, it's very difficult to change, because, every one of us has been through a painful path of having the right resin, that cast, that gives you the right detail, and of course the castability. So once you get a resin that works, then it's very difficult to change to another one. And I agree with you. I mean, you have to make a lot of tests before switching.
Yeah, that's correct. I've seen just one question on the chat that are we able to ship during the corona outbreak? Yes, actually, DHL and the couriers are working on it. Just before,
yes,
so
I answer Katie separately, individually, that we just ship through the orders the next day during these days, because these days everybody working from home, but sometimes we are still working at home and need some resin. So we are aware of this, and if you need resin, we just ship straight away. Yeah. And I have some more questions about settings project 1200. Okay, we'll share in our website soon.
Yeah.
Mr. Carlos asking is about compensation shrinkage in CAT. We already answered this.
Yes,
I think. And Mr. Aravind finds our wax resin is a bit flexible. He's asking what to do.
Probably either I would say if it depends which printer and which light exposure he is using. But typically, if the right, let's say, light exposure and the right exposure is done, it will be flexible, but not too much. So you can always post-cure a bit, but I don't recommend it for casting resins. So I don't know. Do you have any suggestions, Chesko, on that? Because you use every day the wax resin.
Sorry, I was.
Yeah.
Can you repeat the question, please?
The question is, one of our attendees is using the wax resin and finds that it's very flexible, and what he can do about it. Flexible, I guess, smooth. My experience is that it's not so flexible, so maybe there is not
at all. Is that, I think it's because of the light intensity of the machine, of the printing machine. Yeah. If we could know which printer does he have, has he got? Because I mean, wax is after washing it properly, it gets hard enough.
Yeah, that's correct. Okay, so if you can tell us more about his printers and the settings he used, maybe we can help us also after the webinar. Now, about silicone mold, so I mentioned earlier that we have a specific resin, RTV, which is cheaper than the castable resins, and you can use it to make the silicone mold. Some of our customers, particularly in Dubai, they are also using the dark resin to make silicone molds, I think because they like very much the printing sharpness. So I would say most of the resin that we have, castable or non-castable, you can do silicone mold out of them because they are quite enough strong and they would withstand easily the silicone mold. Now, making rubber mold is another issue because you have temperature, and for that you can use RTV and maybe try also other resins, but again, mind that it may sticks when you cut the rubber. Okay, a few questions that some of our, I think, Instagram followers ask us. So I just want to briefly go through this. How shall I keep my resin? Usually resin doesn't like the UV light, and in the sun there is UV light. So you should keep your bottle in an environment which is, let's say, dark and room temperature. Typically, liquid resin doesn't like very cold temperature. You may have some crystals happening if it's very cold. And also outside of the light. So don't leave the bottle open and don't leave the resin in the middle of the room because light will cure it. Can I leave my tray overnight? Yes, you can if there is no UV coming, but usually we recommend always to shake and mix your resin before printing. Why? Because in the resin, there are some components that activate and make the polymerization with the UV light. And if you don't shake it, some of those components may fall down if you leave it too long. And when shall I filter my resin? Typically, if you have some falling parts in your printer and it's in your tank, you see those parts. Sorry, Tula, you want to stop me maybe?
Sorry.
I was reading the thing, so just let me finish.
Okay.
And if you have some small parts or dirt in it, then just filter the tank. And how can I avoid shrinkage? We mentioned a part of it, but I just want to add also another trick. Shrinkage starts when you start after washing with alcohol. So if you don't want any shrinkage, you can leave your parts non-washed and wash them and cut the supports or whatever you have to do before casting. So that's also another trick. And also you can leave it in a plastic bag sealed because the humidity and the environment affects also the shrinkage. Okay, sorry, Tula, go on.
Yeah, no, my excuse is because it was about shrinkage and I was thinking to wait after you finish all those questions. Christian is asking, in the cleaning process, you will have shrinkage in plus. For example, if you immerse the piece more time.
Yes, if you leave too long in the alcohol, the part of the resin, a part of the alcohol may remain in the resin. So yes, I don't know if I answered that question, but Do you want to add something about what I said, Chesko, or you're
No, I mean, make a point in shaking the resin. I also use in the tank, if I have the resin for 2-3 days, then I use a credit card to move the resin. That also works.
Yeah,
but it's very important, because otherwise if at some point I didn't make it because I was in a rush or something like this, resin doesn't attach to your to the platform, so prints fails.
Yeah, that's true. I see one question. Does resin from Harish? Does resin evaporates if you keep it overnight? Actually, just about the tray overnight, no, it doesn't. There is nothing in the resin that will evaporate in room temperature, so you can keep it. But what is important is that you shake it before using. And also, what I usually recommend is to pour back the remaining part that is in the tank in your bottle using a very thin filter, a tiny filter, let's say, so that the remaining part is poured back in the total bottle, and you shake it with this 1 kg bag, so it shakes better. That's what we do typically in our office. But you know, okay.
Question about Mr. Wadi. If we have any recommendation for the temperature and time for pressure while making the rubber mold by using RTV mold, well, actually, we don't directly recommend rubber mold to take from our RTV resin. We mostly recommend silicone mold, but maybe you may answer for the temperature and time.
To be honest, I don't have an answer to that, because in Turkey and in some other countries, what I've seen is they do the normal Castaldo or whatever brand they use, a rubber mold process. I don't have an answer to that. Maybe you have some answers, Chesko? Difficult to know.
Yeah, I mean,
to be honest, we sell a lot of direct casting resin because the trend also is moving that way. I have a lot of customers that used to make a lot of mold. Now they move everything to direct casting due to the casting quality. So rubber mold usage is decreasing a lot. In India or in Middle East, there is a lot of silicone mold, RTV mold. Some they still use rubber mold, but the advantage of direct casting is that you can make lighter jewelry, some thickness that you cannot reach with rubber mold, you can reach it with direct casting. So I really don't know what may be the right pressure, and I think it may depends also on the thickness of the part, I guess.
Yes.
Sorry, Kate is asking about she's using an LCD 3D printer and using another resin brand.
Okay.
And while using, she's using, another resin brand that she needs to use a base while she's printing. She's asking if she needs this base while printing with power resins.
Okay, it depends on the printer. I mean, the base thing, and I may mention it later on because we are entering now in the printing section of the webinar. So basically, if you have it depends on your printer and the peeling forces that is adjusted. So for LCD printers, mostly yes, we recommend base. In our Mega 3D printer, we don't use any base. There are some DLP printers that it's better to use base because of the tank and the peeling forces that are exerted. So it depends on the printer, not really, I would say, on any of our resin.
Let's keep more with some of the questions, because today we are having the question answer session. Okay. So let's keep up more. Mr. Carlos is asking, do I need to heat up the resin before using with Formlabs?
Heating up the resin, no, you don't necessarily need to. It's good for the resin sometimes to heat up, let's say at 40-50 degrees to shake well, so that all those little components are well mixed again. But you don't necessarily to heat up for Formlabs. And also, by the way, as far as I know, Formlabs already has its own heater, so it goes probably around 35, 40, or 45 degrees. But it's good to heat in general. But please just go ahead.
I would say that if we are in winter wintertime and your room temperature is very low, then it's good to heat the resin.
I agree. Yeah. Typically, resin, it's good to have, let's say, 30, 35, 40 degrees around. And just as an example, our Mega 3D printer, depending on the resin, is optimizing it at 40, 45 degrees, the resin temperature. So we have a sensor that, heats up. But Formlabs also has a sensor. So maybe wintertime, they need to heat up a bit more.
Yes. Also, what we recommend to keep your resin in stock, which is the environment of 25 degrees room temperature and dry environment to keep it. Okay, Mr. Sam is asking which resin is good for the big pendants. And also I have a question from Harish, like how to polish layers and how to get the smooth surface easily. That we have a coming slides, but please you may answer.
I mean, for big pendants, I think you can use any of the resin. There is no such thing like one resin is better for big parts than another one, I think. I mean, that's my opinion. Maybe Cesco, if you have any other
exactly the same. I mean, I wouldn't say it's just only about the resins. I mean, power resins are all of them are the castability is very good. The main problem is what investment are you using, what powder ratio are you using. So about the castability is not only a thing of the resin. I mean, you can have the one that you like more. I think that barn and opaque are more like, I would say, gummy, right? So I would say that they are easier to grow anything, any part, right? While with the wax, you get, a smoother surface, okay? But sometimes it's not as good to grow some pieces, right? But it might depend on the printer you have. So it's a question, it's a difficult question to tell, because you must test on your printer, and that's something that you must do.
Yeah, I agree. The other question, I think it was about the polishing, how you can polish. I guess there is two ways of polishing. One is after casting. This is standard polishing. Before casting, actually, for direct castable resins, not a lot of people are polishing. You may use some cotton, cotton to polish. But I don't know, what is your experience on that? I don't think there is a need as well to polish. You don't have so many.
Not at all. Okay. I mean, if you have problems with these resins about having layers, it's not because of the resin, it's because of the printer. So,
I agree.
Make sure that you're using anti-aliasing.
We have actually a couple of slides later on. So now I think we can enter in the printing section, more details about how to better print. Here I put a slide about how, because this is also a question that comes a lot, how low can I go in the thickness of my part? So we took here a pendant that has normally a 0.4 millimeter surface and 0.3 string thickness. And what I did is I just scale it down. So I scale it down, up to it becomes very small. And when you scale it down, you have the same part with a part of it is surface and a part of it has strings that reduce. So in the middle, you have like surface that are around 0.20 millimeter, and the string thickness is 0.15. And if you do such a test on your printer, this is really dependent on the printer that you are using and also on the resin. So the printer, because your light should be uniform everywhere, so you can compare it. And also the peeling forces are very important when you have very, very thin surfaces. So if you have, let's say, a thin surface that shakes, if the peeling force are not well done, you may not go so low. So it depends on your printer. But this is a test we did in our own printer, the Mega 3D printer. You can go up to 0.17 in terms of surface and 0.13 in terms of thickness of the strings. But mostly, this is not really something you would be able to cast. After 0.12, you have breaking parts. So the resin is not strong enough to hold. And what typically in Turkey they use as a surface is 0.25, 0.30. And the string thickness is usually 25 or 0.25 or 0.30. This is the safe part, not for the 3D printer, but for the casting. Any comments on that? No? Okay.
It's exactly the same, yeah.
I just want to mention here one typical question that we get, what is the right exposure? Am I putting too much light? Am I overexposing? So we have this little ball, which has tiny strings, and you can see the difference between overexposing, so putting too much light or too much time on the left-hand side, and the correct one in the right-hand side. And actually, you can see also the weight difference. So this is related to what I mentioned earlier. If you have overexposure or some blading issues in your resin or in your printer, then you will have higher weight on the resin, which will also become higher weight in the gold. So that's very important to have the right exposure and the right parameters. And also to have a professional 3D printer that gives you the right light exposure everywhere on the plate. Yeah.
So I would say that sometimes we put the blame on the resin, okay, when we don't get the right, resolution. And we must say that the printer, this is something that you need to look at what printer do you have. You cannot expect the same resolution from a low-cost printer and from a high-end printer.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, also there is a consistency not only on the build plate, but also in time. I mean, with time, the light intensity may change on, let's say, cheaper printers. And so if, we used to sell ourselves LCD printers 3 years ago. And we stopped doing that, and now we are investing a lot in the projector-based DLP printers that we have, the mega printers, since 1.5 years. So the reason why we did that is that we discovered that our customers were not happy in the LCD printers, the difference between different areas of the platform, but also in time, it's really can degrade very fast. So something that you print today, 1 month after, you may have a very different scenario there. Okay. Today we cannot hear you actually. I don't know if. Sorry. Can you hear me, Chesko?
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody can hear us, but today we cannot hear you. Okay. I'll just continue the presentation while you come back with your sound. One thing what do you do when the parts are falling? This happens in some printers, but also, it can happen quite often. What I recommend here is, okay, there are a few things that you need to check. The first very important thing is the calibration of the plate. So whether the plate is very parallel or not to the tank. We don't hear you today. The calibration of the plate. The other thing is the peeling forces. So let's say you have a very well calibrated system, but the general peeling system of your 3D printer is not well done, and you may have some issues due to the peeling mechanism, and that means that you may have some part falling. What is important also to check the base layer. Do you put there? Do you hear us? No, we don't hear you. You will write on the chat box and we will answer you. That's fine. But I can see actually attendees chat box, so we will take some questions. And also the plate roughness. Now, in our printer, we don't have a rough, we don't need actually a rough plate, because we optimize everything, like the base layers, the peeling system and everything according to that. But in some printers, you may need to have a rougher plate so that the base is sticking better. Now, if you checked everything, like the calibration, the base layers, your plate, everything seems flat, but still you have falling parts, I recommend that you can put some resin, with your finger or anything, and cure it a bit, and use that plate while curing, because resin attached to resin better than resin to metal. And this is my recommendation. I don't know, Chesko, if you have any.
Yes, definitely. I mean, if you put some of the same resin, then you cure it for 2-3 minutes, and then it gets better adhesion. Yeah.
I see one question which I will answer quickly. Joao said, how many base layers do you recommend? Now, this depends also on your peeling system. Typically, you may use, let's say, 8 or 10 layers at 50 micron. But again, it depends on your printer and on the peeling.
Light intensity, yeah.
Yeah, and the light intensity as well. Let's see. Robert said, on Anycubic, start to flatten the base, because from factory, the base is not flat. Okay, so this is another issue. If you receive a printer and already the plate is not flat from the manufacturer, and you need to polish it. So that's a good recommendation, Robert. It's important to have a very flat plate, and you cannot see it visually. So you need to do some tests on printing. Okay, Tülay, we cannot hear you, but I just go on about supports. Let me see if there is any other question quickly. Okay, Jeffrey asked, are the prints working at 25 micron? I guess he mentioned Z height. Yes, sure. You can always print. You can always print at 25 micron. Our printer, you can print 25, 35, 50 micron. We even did 10 micron prints. Now I think the Z layer. What is important is what is the optimum rate between your Z layer height and the resin sharpness. So in other words, you may have better result with the dark resin at 50 micron than another resin at 25 micron, because the light that goes through that resin is curing in a perfect optimum way. So again, this is a difficult question. People tend to think that if I reduce the Z layer, I will have a better result. But sometimes we have seen that depending on the resin you are using, depending on the peeling mechanism that your printer has, even if you go down below to 10 micron, you may not have a better result than 50 micron. That's my experience. But I don't know, Chesko, if you have anything.
Yes, I mean, sometimes it's going to depend on the exposure that the light exposure you have. But I agree. Sometimes I don't see much difference between. I see much difference between 25 and 50, but depending on the resin, it's not a huge difference. Yeah.
One more question from Preeti. Maybe I didn't answer it earlier on. He asked that he wants to know how to calculate the exact weight depending on the volume. So because our density is 1.14, what you do is you measure on Rhino or any CAD software the volume of your part, you print it, you weight it, and you multiply basically your volume by 1.14 to get the optimum weight that our resin print should be. So that's a way maybe that you can use to calibrate your machine or your exposure. And one last question, I mean, not last, but one that I've seen. Joao said, what is the better peeling system? Well, that's a long topic, I think, because when we speak about peeling, it means the tank mechanism, what materials they are using on the tank. The Z-axis movements are very important. Hi, Tülay.
Hello.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, perfect. I was taking some questions, so perfect. Welcome back.
Okay, good.
So about the peeling system, so basically, there are a lot of things happening. The light power, the way the polymerization is happening, the tank that they are using, whether it's an FEP tank, whether it's a silicone tank or another material, the movements that happens, because some printers, they have small peeling movements, some they have larger peeling movements. So this all affects on what we call the peeling system. Okay, so let me go back to the presentation, so then you can go on with the questions, but I answered pretty much some of the questions, so maybe you will follow up.
Well, excuse me, when I lost my connection, I lost also my chat, so I lost also some of the questions.
Yeah.
But I see one question now, which is from Ghanshyam. He's asking if the humidity is effect on your direct casting or not.
The direct casting resin. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, humidity doesn't affect the print, but it will affect the shrinkage. So let's say you print and you wait 1 week for the casting. If it's more humid, you will have higher shrinkage. So that's one difference. But also, as we all know, but this is independent from the resin, humidity also affects the casting because of the investment. So if you have a more humid, let's say, environment, in Mumbai, for example, in India, it's very humid. So you need to keep your investment quite dry. And also, what I recommend is to leave, before pouring in the oven, longer the investment, the flask on the ground, if it's a humid environment, because it will take longer time for water to be removed from the investment. I don't know, any comments on that, Cesco?
100% agree. I mean, we had a lot of issues until we got to the conclusion that humidity affects a lot to the casting, especially in areas that are very humid. I remember a casting house that was doing wonderful castings in summer, and then in winter was awful, doing the same, and it was because of the humidity. Yeah.
This is a very known, like whether you cast, let's say, resin or even wax. I mean, because of the investment, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, most of the attendees, they know about how to support the models, but here I put some slides about it. So one way is to detect, you can draw a planner and pull it up so that you can detect where the first parts may be built. And these are the parts that will be needing support. Here I put a slide from last webinar as well. This also answers whether you can draw the casting sprue like support. In the part in the middle, we have basically the casting sprue, which is also doing the support for the parts. So on this, I think if we speak about support, and I would like to have your comments on that, Cesco. My view is that the peeling mechanism is very, very important, because there are different printers and different technologies. So let's say an SLA printer will need different amount of support than a DLP printer. And even inside the DLP printers, you have different type of peeling systems that allow you to put more or less supports to have a same result.
Yes.
And LCD also. So any comments on that?
That's, well, I can talk about what an ASIGA does. And the thing is that in ASIGA, we do have a weight system that allows the printer to know which are the peeling forces, right? So the printing gets as long as it has to do. I mean, the peeling is very soft, you know. So that allows us to put less supports in order to, have less suction forces.
Yes.
And I can see that in other LCD printers or in other printers, you don't have that kind of, smoothness in the printer. So you have to put more supports.
Yeah. So it really depends I think on the peeling system and on the printer technology. I remember, as NovaFab, before having our own 3D printer, we were first doing manufacturing of resin, and at that time, that was I think 5 years ago, before even launching our own DLP machine, we were selling Formlabs 3D printer, and I remember we needed a lot of support for Formlabs because the tank is moving, so this is affecting also of the peeling. And let's say you have a small, very tiny surface. Every time the tank is moving, you will have this movement happening. The peeling forces up and down are also quite, let's say, not smooth. So, and you have this issue. So I can say, yeah, the support depends on your printer mostly, and the system that it's used. Okay. Just want to mention a few slides about. Okay.
Excuse me, I lost my chat, but as far as I remember, Mr. Mohammed Kurnazi from Lazurdi was asking about if he how he can understand if the resin is good or bad due to the storage conditions or due to the shelf life of the resin.
Okay. To understand that, the best way is to do a test print, but you need to have a proper 3D printer with the proper light exposure. One thing is that, and to check if you have enough curing happening. So typically, most of the castable resins lifetime would be 6 months. Let's say if you have a resin that is 2 years old or 1 year old, and it will start losing its reactivity to UV. You will still be able to cure with it, so you will still be able to print with it, but you need to increase your light intensity or light exposure time. So typically, after a couple of months, after 6 months or so, what you may do is you print the same part, and if you start seeing that you have some failure in the part, you will increase by 10%, 20%, 30% your light exposure. And that's how you can still keep using the resin. But there will be a part where the reactivity of the resin will be all gone. So even if you put, let's say, 100% more light, it will still not work. So that's a good question, but the best way, what I recommend is the bowls that we have there. I know that they are using a DLP printer. It's also our customer, Lazurdi. So what I recommend is to do a test print on the small bowls, and to check the weight. If the weight is too low, it means you don't have enough curing happening. Maybe some comments on that, Cesco?
Yes, I mean, I would say that the storage is very important, not to have it in a very warm place, because then you can lose properties, faster than if you keep it okay. But also make sure that your resin is not more than 1 year old. Yeah. And I would say 9 months. Sometimes I see after 9-10 months sometimes you can have issues, but it depends if you keep it on the right storage.
Yeah. I mean, we tend to say 6 months for safety reason. So above 6 months, I mean, in our labeling is always 6 months, but I know it's very depending on the storage and also on the shipment conditions. Like Saudi Arabia is very hot during the shipment. The resin is reaching, let's say, 50 degrees. And this is really, I will tell you one thing, it's not a trade secret, but the way we do, and not only ourselves, but in all chemistry, the way they check the time of expiration of a material is by putting it in an oven. They put typically liquid in an oven of 55 degrees. And if you keep it for 3 days, that means it's expired by 1 month. So what happens is that if we ship to, let's say, Saudi Arabia or Dubai or other countries in summertime or in hot weather, if there's 55 degrees that reach, and if that takes, let's say, 6 days, that means that you already have 2 months of expiry in that resin. So for us to keep it safe, we say 6 months, because I know that we have some customers in India also, they it's warmer than some other countries. So that's one thing that we do. Okay, here we have some printing issues. I will just mention. Okay, Tülay, you want to ask a question?
Well, yes, before going deeply in these printing issues, that we always receive some questions about our shipment, like if we ship to USA, if we ship to worldwide, like if we ship to everywhere. Yes, we ship worldwide, and it's reaching really like 2 or 3 business days, and there is no issue with our shipping, and all you receive your shipment notification via email. And really, there is no issue with our shipment. And even if with these Corona days, we are just ship straight away of your orders. So just no worries on this. I would like to highlight this. And I have questions about. So sorry. If we join to the Formnext exhibition. Well, it's industrial exhibition. We don't really aim to be there as an exhibitor, but yes, we visit it every year almost. Maybe Mr. Hakan, you can explain.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I have been in Formnext for the last 4 or 5 years just to see what's going on. Because it's my own interest, like not only the DLP or resin-based printers, but they have also very good, metal printers and everything. But our strategy since the beginning was only to focus on 2 sectors, which is jewelry and dental. And we try to attend exhibits in most of the jewelry exhibition, whether it's in India, Dubai, Las Vegas, or Turkey, or let's say Hong Kong and so on. But we don't see that we have, like, the whole strategy that we have as a company is let's optimize one 3D printer and let's optimize resin for one industry. And the industry of jewelry is quite big in Turkey and Middle East. So that's what we did. And because we believe that we are, let's say, good at it, we want to focus on that. And one very important thing is what I kindly ask is not see us like a machine seller. We are selling basically a solution which includes the resin, the 3D printer, but most the technical support and the guys on the ground that gives a solution. Because for me, what is important is if we have a manufacturer, whether it's in Saudi Arabia or in India or anywhere, if they can continue doing direct casting and they can continue printing, that means we will have, we are able to sell them resins. And we don't only sell resin to people that buy our 3D printer. We sell resin to, like the case of Chesco and his customers, to Asiga users or Rapid Shape users and so on. So to make it short, I don't think we will be attending, but we are just visiting like everybody, so we can meet to have a coffee there. That's for Formnext. Okay, I just want to go ahead briefly about some printing issues. So on the left-hand side, you have typical missing issues of support. And also, I want to speak a bit about the orientation. Now, we have seen some issues with some printers about the orientation. So what is the best orientation? There are 2 types of orientation. One, we call it the Z orientation. So you have a flat part. If it's like this, or let's say like this, it will be 45 degrees. But let's say you have just a very, very slight, like 5, 6, 8 degrees angle. Now, depending on the slicing software that you use, depending whether you are using anti-aliasing or not, and depending on the resolution, you may see some of those layers that are on the left-hand side. These are not layers of 50 micron. They are thicker layers that are repeating layers. And the reason to understand that is because when you have a very small angle on the z-axis, let's say 7 degrees, 8 degrees, when the slicer is slicing that at 50 micron, depending on the resolution of your XY resolution, you may have some repeating blocks if you don't use also anti-aliasing. So what I typically say about the angle is try to keep it either vertical or more than 20 degrees. That's, let's say, 30 degrees, 45 degrees. That's always something that we recommend. Any comment on that, Chesco?
Yes, I mean, try to work on the orientation of the piece.
Yeah. That's very important for all resin-based printers. Yeah. Another thing, there is also the XY orientation. That's a more tricky one. You won't see it a lot, but let's say if you have an orientation of 30 degrees on the Z-axis, depending on how you move the XY orientation of your part, you may see those lines or not see it. So here there is a print without anti-aliasing. This is just a test print that we made. It's a very small part. As you can see in the middle, some parts that were oriented horizontally according to the plate, we have seen those layers. If you move it a bit, like 10 degrees, 20 degrees, then you will not see these layers. This is due to the fact that the pixels you are using, they are square pixels. And when you slice it, it's different to slice something that every time the part comes to the corner of the pixel or to the flat part. So I don't want to give too much technical details. If you are interested in that, I can share. Definitely, you can write us. We can share a report on that. But what I want to say is that the orientation is crucial, depending on the part that you are using and on the printer and on the slicing software. Okay.
Mr. Diego is asking, what software for support do we use? And what would be the alternatives?
I will answer, and I know, Cesko, you are using something else. So what we use in our office from our R&D team, we use Rhino with the Bell Support plugin. It's a free plugin for Rhino. And by the way, we have a couple, I think 10 or 12 videos on our YouTube channel. Maybe you can share our YouTube page, Tulay. So we use Bell Support for Rhino, and it works well for us. There is different way of putting support under Bell Support, but I know you are a master of Matrix, and you are using different tools as well, Cesko. So
yes, well, I mean, I'm using the composer from Asiga to put the supports, but because of the exposure that the machine gives to these supports, right? But I see that a lot of people working with Key2Box and also with Firmware, and I think both of them are very good software for supporting. I haven't tried Bell Support, but I have heard good things about the support. The main thing is, I think everybody's looking at the software that it makes the support itself, but the main thing is that you need to know the logic of supporting. And sometimes it's making the simulation of the growing of the piece, right? And rotate the piece and make this simulation to see what's the best orientation.
Yeah. I think you need to understand, for having a good support also, as you mentioned, the logic of the 3D printer. And I remember, with some guys from our R&D team, we spent really hours watching different 3D printers, how they work. So that's always a way of going on. I think today I have still a problem, but she will join us. One thing I want to mention is, when you watch the 3D printer, depending on your part, here I have put like 2 pictures. One, it's a very tiny surface, and you can see some small holes in some prints. Now, this can happen from different reasons, but mainly, again, is the peeling system, peeling mechanism of your 3D printer. But if you have very thin surface, what you can think of is like a leaf in the water that moves. Tulay, you are back?
I'm back.
Okay, good. So let's imagine you have a very, very thin leaf in the water, and every time that the build plate is moving, this thin leaf is doing this. So if you don't have the right support on the right place, for every small layer, this will make a movement, and you may get some of those holes. So this is the importance of support. The other thing, again, about the peeling mechanism, on the right-hand side, we are on it, but there is a part where there is a hole in the middle. this actually, if you look at the printer, when this happens, it sometimes happens because there is a bubble, air bubble there. And again, I know from our 3D printer, because we worked a lot to remove them, and finally we got rid of them after maybe 6 months of R&D. The peeling forces and the peeling, let's say the plate that shakes the resin at the beginning, the way it works is very important, because you can always have some bubble in the middle. So again, the algorithm used by the printer or the peeling system is important. The way the plate goes down, which type of movements is doing before printing, and let's say during the print, is important to remove those bubbles.
Mr. Diageo from Brazil, he is asking, what software do you use to fix STL files?
Mm-hmm.
And if there's any alternative that he can use.
Everybody knows Magix, I think. That's the most known one. It's kind of expensive, but actually there is a Magic version, which is, I think, by online subscription. I'm not an expert of it, but I believe you can use that service as well, which is a lower price, a monthly fee. But do you have any recommendation on that, Cesko?
Built well. You know, everybody, I mean, the thing is that what knowledge of 3D design, I'm not saying Rhino or whatever, what knowledge do you have? If you build correctly, you won't have to fix that much, you know. And this is something that people forget, you know. Otherwise, I mean, Magix, everybody knows about it. Netfab, they are very good software to fix what you can't fix. But if you grow, or if you make your things in the right way, you won't need that much in fixing STL files.
That's one thing that I always recommend, like in our couple of trips in India or Sri Lanka and so on. You know, there is let's say larger manufacturers, and they have a CAD room where there are a lot of CAD designers. But those CAD designers, they are not the operators on the printer, so they don't see what type of mistakes, if they make any mistakes, what type of mistakes are repeated in the operator's room. So what I always recommend is to have a printer in the CAD room, so that when they design something new, they can just support it and print it and see what type of mistakes they get. So if somebody designing it is able to print it up to the end point, that means that, and if he's able to do that without fixing the part, that means he knows the whole process, right? That's the way I see it.
Yeah.
So okay, we are pretty much wrapping up, and then we may get some couple of questions, but here I just put some mistakes in the supports, like missing supports, or in the case on the right hand side, the part that is, there is a huge casting screw, but the part in the middle doesn't need that casting screw on the top. And also because the part is very thin, basically what you can see in the middle part is that is the part supporting the casting screw, not the way around. So that's a mistake. So we have in our YouTube channel, which I don't know if Tula, you can share our channel. It's a NovaFab YouTube channel. You can see all.
I share again.
All the tutorials. And in our next webinar, we will speak a bit more about the casting. We will have a guest from Dubai, and we are looking, maybe some of our attendees also would like to participate in our webinar, because I know a lot of them are doing casting every day. And we will also plan some couple of other webinars about our own Nova platform. It's a platform where, you know, it enables designers to allow manufacturers to print thousands of designs. So we can get some questions. I don't know if you want to add anything, Cesko.
I don't know if there's any questions that people might have.
Yeah.
Well, I have some questions about casting. Mostly I said that we are going to go deeply on this topic in the next webinar, but you may answer. What is the step-by-step temperature of furnace for black resin with the stone settings? As far as we know, when we receive feedbacks from our customers and our users, that if you want to do diamond casting, which is different by stone setting casting, but anyway, you need to use another special investment. But if you have any experience with stone setting casting, Mr. Cesko, you may also reply, or Mr. Hakan, please.
Yep, Cesko, do you have any comments on that? I can.
We don't do much stone setting with resin. I mean, we mold the resin and then we make it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I've seen. I mean, in Turkey they do it a lot, and also in India and let's say Middle East. Typically, they use, the burnout. I mean, we may speak about this probably, hopefully next week or maybe this week when we will do the webinar about casting. But the burnout is a standard burnout. So you set the stones and you may go up to 720 degrees or depending on the investment, up to 750 degrees, and then cool down before casting. So typically, that's what they are doing here in Turkey. But again, about the stones, depending on the stones, maybe they may have different burnouts. I think the best answer to that will be in our next webinar about casting.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I think we are almost done.
I see one, Albert. I thought it's testing opaque or zero. What do you recommend for a DLP 3D printer? As I mentioned earlier, opaque or zero. Now, the question is whether he should use opaque or zero for a DLP 3D printer. You can use both. Opaque has very proven castability, is very much used for a lot of DLP 3D printers. I would recommend also the dark resin because it has very sharp details. So you can use opaque, dark. If you want no shrinkage at all, it's a new resin we have, it's a zero. But again, depending on the investment that you are using, the casting quality may be slightly different on the zero. So the proven castability is opaque, dark for a DLP 3D printer. Okay. Thank you very much for attending to everybody, but thank you for Cesko to be our guest today.
Thank you very much.
I was very happy to have a good chat with you. And I really hope to see you soon, either in Istanbul or we may meet in Spain or somewhere else.
Well,
last time we met also in Germany.
I think we're going to meet for a long time. We're going to meet in webinars more than in physical places. But this is nice as well. It's always nice to meet you.
Yeah, it was very good chat, and thank you for everybody for attending. Really, we had a lot of questions. I didn't expect so many questions. But that was very exciting. And if we missed some questions, I'm really sorry. But our next webinar, you can follow our NovaFab Instagram page. Please, Tülay, help me on that. All the social.
Yes, do you hear me now?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, great. Well, yeah. Thank you all for joining us today. And please keep all your casting questions for our next webinar. And you may share them with us in advance to get prepared. And thank you very much for joining.
Yeah, that's very important. Just I agree. If they can share us their question beforehand, we can work on it, because sometimes it becomes very difficult to just speak about it. Where some of those questions were coming from our Instagram page or directly from WhatsApp, and we could put some visuals on it, which is very interesting, I think. Okay, so thank you, everybody. Thank you, Cesko.
Thank you.
It was great to meet you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Tülay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you.
Bye.